The 19th century dawned with a mighty roar. Not only did the Industrial Revolution begin, but the old order of society was being challenged like never before. The American and French revolutions had shown people what could be done. They'd won freedom and a new nation from the greatest empire in the world. And now everywhere, people were demanding the right to rule themselves and to honor their own identities. This is Turning Points of History. In this episode, we will see how nationalism was both a force that united and one that divided. We'll see how Germany and Italy came together and how other empires fell apart. And we'll meet a man who wanted to unite two entire continents. Will his dream come true? Let's jump back into the action. Across Europe and Latin America, people were in rebellion. In the southern United States, Nat Turner led a bloody revolt against slavery, while William Lloyd Garrison published The Liberator, a newspaper calling for abolition. Farther south, in Latin America, the region was on fire. Inspired by democratic ideals across the Atlantic, colonies rose up one after another to throw off the shackles of empire. Now let's zoom in on the hero of our story. This is Simon Bolivar. He's from Venezuela, which is still ruled by Spain. But he dreams of a free Latin America from Rio de la Plata to the Isthmus of Panama. He wants to liberate 8 colonies and make them into 5 independent nations. He will lead armies across South America and win. One by one, the Spanish colonies become free. Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Paraguay, Brazil. That last one was a surprise. It was the only colony to gain its independence without a war. A former king of Portugal had set up court in Brazil during Napoleon's invasion of their homeland and got carried away with all the gold. When peace returned to Portugal, they demanded Brazil's independence. The king granted it and moved in. As the Portuguese colony of Brazil was becoming independent, the rest of Latin America was going through a golden age. After decades of fighting, Simon Bolivar could finally take a moment to catch his breath, but he had a warning for his fellow leaders at the Congress of Panama. He said, "We have been rash and reckless, like children playing at war. If the same fiery and headstrong spirit that has done so much evil in America should turn its attention to the other side of the ocean, who could withstand its tempest?" We'll come back to that prophecy in a moment. First, let's look at why he thought this. All around him, nations were uniting. In Western and Northern Europe, the old order was also being challenged. After the Congress of Vienna tried to restore the old order and failed, a wave of liberalism and nationalism spread through Europe, and in 1830, the Belgians threw off their Dutch rulers and became independent. Soon, the whole continent was rumbling with discontent. Then, in 1848, the French king, Louis Philippe, was forced to abdicate and the Second Republic was born. Revolutions broke out all over the continent. In Germany, the leader of the Frankfurt Assembly wanted to unite all the German states into a single democratic nation under a constitution like that of the United States. But the great powers refused to allow it. They didn't want a big, strong Germany. They feared it would compete with them and upset the balance of power in Europe. Soon, most of the revolutionaries had been crushed, but in Italy things were different. Here, the old order was maintained by foreign rulers. Most Italians wanted to end that. The Austrians and Spaniards ruled parts of Italy, as did the British and Dutch in smaller states, and the Pope ruled the central states. Now remember, Italians were not a race or a religion. They were people who lived in Italy and spoke Italian, and they wanted to overthrow the foreign rulers and unite the country. The revolutionaries in northern and central Italy were led by Joseph Mazzini. Meanwhile, in southern Italy, a secret society called the Carbonari took up arms. Their name means charcoal burners, because they used to meet in the forests and disguise themselves like charcoal burners, so the police could unfind them. They worked to overthrow the Bourbon dynasty. As we'll see, there were setbacks and defeats for the nationalists. But here's the good news. By the end of the century, both Germany and Italy were unified, independent nations. Let's go back to those uprisings of 1848 for a moment. They were not successful at first, but they planted seeds that would grow. The Germans and Italians weren't quite ready to unite, but the ideas of nationality and self-rule continued to grow. But hold on, let's not forget about the Ottoman Empire. There, the leaders knew their empire was crumbling. The Janissaries were losing power and reforms were needed, but it was too late. The empire was ripe for nationalist uprisings. In Greece, the War of Independence resulted in the establishment of a new nation, but the Ottomans held on to their North African territories. In Egypt, Mehmet Ali began building an independent state, conquering Syria and pushing into Arabia. The Egyptians would not break away completely until later. Then came the Crimean War, a conflict that pitted the Russians against the Ottomans and France, who was allied with Britain. The Russians lost and even more power slipped away from the Ottomans. At the same time, nationalism was causing problems inside the Austrian Empire. The Habsburgs ruled over many different ethnic groups. There were Hungarians, Romanians, Poles, Serbs and Croats, Czechs, Slovaks, Russians, Ukrainians, and many more. And the empire was very weak after the defeat in the Napoleonic Wars. Many of these peoples sought independence. In the end, the only ones who achieved it were the Hungarians, who got their own government and autonomy within the empire. The Austrian Empire was soon renamed the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So in summary, The uprisings of 1848 failed to unify Germany and Italy, but they made the Austrians realize they could no longer keep all of their diverse people under one rule. The dream of a unified Latin America didn't happen either. But through it all, the spirit of nationalism spread like wildfire. This brings us back to Simon Bolivar's warning at the Congress of Panama. He was right that Latin America was unified in its fight for independence, but once the wars were over, that unity disappeared. His dream of Gran Colombia collapsed, but perhaps he understood that sometimes nationalism must be tempered with realism. Uniting people based on geography and culture is a noble ideal, but it isn't always possible. Now, let's think about this for a second. What's the main reason for the rise of nationalism? People wanted to protect their unique culture and language. They wanted to be proud of who they were. So it seems pretty obvious what the opposite of nationalism is, doesn't it? It's not caring about your own culture, your own language, and ignoring the needs of your own people. And if we fast forward to today, we see similar conflicts and divisions caused by exactly that. This is a lesson we have to keep in mind, that nationalism can be a powerful force for good, uniting people in their struggle for freedom, but it can also be a dangerous force for division. The unification of Germany and Italy, however, was one of the great triumphs of nationalism. In Germany, Prussia took the lead. Under Otto von Bismarck, it went to war against Denmark to gain control of Schleswig-Holstein and then against Austria to dominate northern Italy. The Franco-Prussian War of 1870 ended with the capture of the French emperor and the establishment of a German empire. Soon the German chancellor was looking toward world domination. Meanwhile in Italy, the House of Savoy and Piedmont-Sardinia led the way. Victor Emmanuel II was proclaimed king of all Italy after years of hard fighting. Now, despite the fact that these two nations were unifying, the same thing that caused the disunity in Europe was still present. The Germans and Italians still had to share land with the Dutch, Austrians, French, and Swiss. And as we'll see next time, colonial rivalries threatened to tear these new nations apart. That's why it's so important to learn from history and to remember that unity and diversity are opposites. Strong nations can respect the cultures and languages of other nations. Progress isn't just about industry. It's also about spreading freedom and equality. And sometimes progress means accepting diversity rather than trying to erase it. Thanks for watching. To keep these videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.